Halloween is our favorite holiday, and we love playing scary games around this time of year. Making a game scary is a tricky process, and a lot of games that try to be scary wind up being strange, silly, or just disgusting instead. With that in mind, we decided to make a list of the top 10 scariest games out there. Number 10. Phantasmagoria. Phantasmagoria is a motion capture PC game made during that wave of games that tried to create interactive movies with legitimate actors. This movement was not successful. However, we do have some little gems from this era, like Phantasmagoria. In the game, you play the wife of a struggling writer as the two of you move into a haunted house. Yes, it is very similar to the plot of The Shining. You explore the house, solve minor puzzles, and follow clues to discover what happened to the previous residents. It wasn't good. While your husband slowly loses his mind. The game gradually builds to a terrifying conclusion as you have to defeat your deranged husband and the demon who possesses him. There is something uniquely horrific about a wife trying to escape and ultimately forced to fight her homicidal spouse. The final level, with your familiar house now filled with ominous colors and shot from canted angles, is a great experience, and the closest we'll ever get to having a game in which we have to outrun and overcome an axe-wielding Jack Nicholson. Number 9. Deadly Premonition. Deadly Premonition isn't known for being scary, it's mostly known for being odd. As Detective York, you investigate a series of surprisingly graphic murders in a small town loaded with picturesque views and quirky residents. Though nobody is weirder than York, with his oddly upbeat demeanor, his strange nonchalance at the appearance of supernatural enemies, and his arbitrary asides to an imaginary friend. The game has some scary moments, though, as you battle creepy, backwards-bending ghosts and repeatedly encounter an unstoppable axe-wielding maniac. The murders are also increasingly horrific as the game progresses. By the end of the game, the insanity has ramped up high enough that you have no idea what to expect from the final battle, and boy is it weird. You have to put up with some rigid controls and antiquated graphics, but if you can get past that, then this game delivers some excellent scary moments. Number 8. Shadow Man. One often overlooked game from the Nintendo 64 era was Shadow Man, a game in which you play as an undead superhero trying to save both the world of the dead and the living from Legion, an evil spirit who wants to destroy the world, as they do. You spend the game collecting souls from various creatures and getting some awesome tattoos, in both the real world and dead side, and eventually tracking down 5 serial killers whose souls Legion is particularly interested in obtaining. The game has a rich atmosphere full of dread, as you visit death row, haunted asylums, a childlike ghost world, and even track Jack the Ripper through the sewers of London. The battles with the serial killers, which normally occur after long stretches of level, are particularly exciting and somewhat terrifying as each one has some surprising abilities, and your death can send you back to a distant save point. It's a creepy, dark, spooky title that is a lot of fun on the Nintendo 64.
The horror, I embrace it.
Number 7. Condemned. Condemned was billed as a first-person beat-em-up game, but it actually works much better as a horror story with some excellent crime scene investigation thrown in. You play a cop investigating a serial killer who is killing other serial killers, while the city is experiencing a particular disease that is driving local residents insane and homicidal. You actually become something of a serial killer yourself as you punch and smash your way through various creepy environments to get to your next crime scene. In the crime scenes, you use various devices to uncover clues to find your next location. Much of your investigation takes place in dilapidated locations and dimly lit hallways. The standout level is an abandoned department store, filled with drug addicts, creepy mannequins, and enemies posing as mannequins who pursue you. There is one great scene where a group of mannequins get closer and closer every time you turn away, forcing you to flee further into the store. With its interesting plot, fun, and brutal gameplay and heavy atmosphere, Condemned is an underappreciated horror game. Number 6. Fatal Frame 2. To really scare you, a game has to make you feel vulnerable. Fatal Frame 2 does this by casting you in the role of a young girl who is trapped with her sister in a seemingly abandoned village in rural China. As night falls, the ghostly inhabitants of the village emerge, and the characters begin to uncover the story of how the residents of the village died. Needless to say, it wasn't pleasant. You encounter some benevolent figures, but most of the supernatural residents are out to get you. Your single weapon in the game is your camera, which can harm the ghosts when they attack you. The trick is that the amount of damage the camera inflicts depends on how close the ghost is, meaning that you have to wait until they are almost upon you before taking the picture. Watching their unsettling movements as they drift into frame, reaching for you slowly and menacingly, is a uniquely unnerving experience. As we were making this list, we noticed that there are no other titles that have ghosts in them, making Fatal Frame 2 a unique experience among horror titles. Number 5. Slender. What can you say about Slender that hasn't already been said? It is a simple game in which you try to collect pieces of paper before the ever-present Slender Man tracks you down, and he is one creepy antagonist. The game usually lets you get quite a few of the scraps of paper you need before Slender Man starts to show up, usually just staring at you from across a field or within a doorway. We never quite understood Slender Man's powers. Whenever he is near you, your vision blurs and you seem to be losing consciousness as though his mere presence is driving you insane. He can appear at any time in any location, making the sequences in which you have to seek out scraps of paper from inside claustrophobic buildings especially terrifying. Slender Man has now achieved a great deal of notoriety. We saw Slender Man costumes on sale this year. If you want a quick scare and don't need a lot of plot, this is definitely the game for you. Number 4. Outlast. Outlast has the notable privilege of being one of the few next-generation games to make our list. You play as freelance journalists following up on an ominous tip regarding bizarre experiments happening at an isolated mental hospital in a remote Colorado mountain. You inadvertently lock yourself inside with a cadre of the tortured inmates who seemingly are anticipating your arrival. The game has its fill of jump scares and hair-raising moments due in large part to the relentless tank, Walker, who pursues you throughout the game, as well as the naked cannibal brothers, whose intentions are never made all that clear, and that may be for the best. A brief midsection will turn most anyone's stomach, as you're rescued from one assault by an inmate playing a doctor on those he's captured. The game falls apart towards the end under the weight of its own mythology, but the nightmare sprint to get there will surely please any fan of the horror genre. Number 3. Alien Isolation. It feels strange to include a brand new game on this list before we can verify that it stands the test of time, but it's an easy choice when the game is as impressive as Alien Isolation is. The game painstakingly recreates Ridley Scott's 1979 Alien universe, complete with retro-futuristic monochrome CRT computer screens, a subtle violin orchestral score that screeches as the scales escalate, and of course one unpredictable and absolutely terrifying xenomorph. The narrative falls between the first two films following Ripley's briefly mentioned daughter, Ellen, as she journeys to find out what happened to her mom. You'll explore the dilapidated space station, constantly aware of your own imminent demise thanks to the rapid beeping of the perfectly recreated motion bug tracker clutched tightly in your hand. What did the crew do with Ripley's escape pod? Why is the xenomorph here? Why in hell do any Wayland employees ever agree to work with the company's androids, knowing they'll eventually go homicidal? The answers await you on the other side of this game, provided you can deal with 15 to 20 hours of constant stress that comes with surviving Alien Isolation. Number 2. Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 is a fantastic game. We have rarely felt so revitalized by a franchise taking such big risks in changing its gameplay. These risks often do not pay off. As Leon Kennedy, you search for the president's daughter in an isolated Spanish village whose residents are very hostile to outsiders. Gradually, of course, you discover a sinister plot about a parasitic invasion while you dodge chainsaws and outrun boulders and do a little spearfishing. The scariest moment comes late in the game. Leon uncovers an underground lab, and inside he meets these nondescript, unstoppable zombies called Regeneradores, who initially simply won't die. Anything you shoot, they simply regrow as they relentlessly amble towards you. You eventually discover their weakness, but until then, their haunting, creepy breathing will keep you on your toes. If you haven't played Resident Evil 4 in a while, this is a great season to pick it back up.
Amateurs.
Number 1. Dead Space 2. Dead Space 2 is currently our pick for scariest video game. As Isaac, you battle against an army of necromorphs, aliens who inhabit dead humans and morph them into disgusting mutations. The monsters in this game are legendarily nasty, and the death sequences are also graphic enough that we felt like the game was punishing us for dying. Dead Space, as many others have said, works because it knows how to make you feel powerless against extremely dangerous enemies, and the visceral death sequences really raise the stakes for staying alive. Dead Space 2 also possesses the single most harrowing experience we've played in any game, in which you have to delicately conduct eye surgery on yourself using a comically large drill that is apparently used for both precision eye surgery and diamond mining. It has jump scares, genuine scares, and a pretty great story. It's definitely our choice for scariest video game.
Isaac, can you hear me?
Music.